There are things that, from the outside, seem like happiness. A house with lights on, a dinner table with everyone present, laughter during family gatherings. But no one knows what the woman sitting there is really feeling. She might be picking up food for her husband, smiling politely at relatives, but inside, she feels empty, like a room no one has entered for a very long time. Then, one day, she bursts into tears, not because of anything specific, just because someone asked, "Are you okay?" And she didn't know how to answer. Have you ever seen a married woman, beautiful, put together, successful, but with eyes that seem hollow? She has it all: a respectful husband, well-behaved children, a tidy home, and a life that, from the outside, seems perfectly happy. But something's off. She smiles just enough. She's gentle at the right moments. She's present as if playing a role she no longer believes in. And then, a man appears. He doesn't need to stand out. He doesn't need to try to seduce her. He just needs to be there, at the right time, when her heart is at its weakest. Is it because they lack morals? Is it because they crave the forbidden? Or is it because they're slowly dying in a marriage that's become nothing but form, and no one sees it? This video isn't to accuse, and it's not to make excuses either. It's to speak a truth many people don't dare to mention. It's not that married women are more prone to falling than others. It's that they're more vulnerable and more easily forgotten in their own homes. If you're someone looking in from the outside or someone living it from the inside, you need to hear this story to understand how it all begins and why, for many, it's so hard to stop. 1. Happy on the outside, empty on the inside. Have you ever seen a couple step out of a luxury car, hand in hand, smiling with that perfect, polished look of a happy family? The husband opens the car door gracefully, and the wife gently holds his arm as if they were the ideal model of modern marriage. Their wedding photo is carefully framed and hangs in the center of the living room. Affectionate captions still appear like clockwork every weekend on social media. Everything looks perfect if you only see it from the outside. But what about the inside, behind that elegant wooden door, behind the curtain of wishes and bright smiles in pictures? There's another story, one of silence, isolation, and cracks. Many marriages are kept alive only in form, while the emotions have quietly faded. Happiness no longer feels real. It becomes a performance, memorized and maintained out of duty, not chosen from the heart. The woman in that story doesn't betray because of a lack of morals. She doesn't give up because she lacks a sense of family. She's just living in a life where her emotions have been forgotten. She still plays her part, goes to work, cares for the kids, cooks, puts on makeup, smiles, and chats. But inside, she's a barren land, a place where love once existed, and now there's nothing left. Some nights, she lies with her back turned to the man who once meant the world to her. No words are exchanged. The person next to her is lost in his phone, worn out from work stress, or simply no longer sees a reason to ask, "Are you okay today?" And so, she stops hoping. She gets used to the silence and learns to endure it, quietly. Sometimes, all she needs is a hug, a gentle touch, a simple, honest sentence. "You've been quiet these past few days. Is something going on?" But that never comes. She lives like a shadow in her own home, and slowly, she closes off her heart. Not because she wants to change, but because she's too tired of always being the one who keeps the fire alive. Until one day, someone shows up. Not someone more perfect, not stronger, not overly romantic, just someone who comes at the right time. Someone who asks, "Are you okay?" A kind question from a stranger can sometimes awaken a heart that's been asleep for too long, and she's caught off guard, not because she loves this person, but because she suddenly realizes it's been so long since anyone asked her that. The third person doesn't destroy a family. They simply show up at the moment the woman is weakest, and no one gives up a whole family just for a glance. But people do let go when they can no longer find love in their own home. Betrayal doesn't start with stolen kisses. It starts with a heart that no longer feels seen. A marriage that looks steady on the outside can sometimes be the place that holds the most exhaustion, because the women inside have gotten used to being strong, to pushing through, to suffering without complaint. They still smile, still look composed, but inside are long stretches of emptiness, unnoticed, unfilled. Then one day, they step out of the old feelings, not to chase something new, but simply because they can't keep living like a shadow in someone else's life. No one wants to betray, but when the heart is no longer being nourished, even the smallest ray of light can shake it. Love doesn't die from one major mistake. It dies from too many days without care. Marriage doesn't break because of betrayal, but because of silence, indifference, because two people sit next to each other and have nothing left to say. So if you see a couple that looks truly happy, don't be too quick to envy them. Remember, sometimes a smile is the last thing people hold on to after every other feeling has already faded. 2. When a woman feels forgotten. There's a saying, betrayal doesn't begin with a third person. It begins with the first. The one who once promised to love her forever, quietly stopping doing so. We often think love is a matter between two people, but sometimes it only takes one person to stop being present emotionally for someone else to walk away. She didn't betray out of blindness. She didn't leave out of selfishness. It's just that, for too long, she lived in a relationship where she felt forgotten. You've seen it in the first part. Smiles performed just to play a role, wedding photos hanging in the living room, while hearts grow cold on either side of the bed. So what makes a woman who was once so patient slowly become distant? It's not because someone else stepped in. It's because the person beside her slowly stepped back, with daily doses of indifference. Not every woman leaves her husband because she's fallen for someone else. Many leave simply because they've been forgotten by the man they married. Not forgotten birthdays, not forgotten gifts, but forgotten how to listen, forgotten how to care, forgotten how to ask, "How was your day?" and genuinely wait for the answer. She once said, very softly, "I'm tired today." He just said, then went back to his phone like every other day. Her words hung in the air. No one caught them. No one noticed. And that was the first moment she began to withdraw, gently, quietly. But it stretched into a habit. Some nights, they still lie next to each other, separated only by a thin bedsheet. Yet it feels like they're in two different worlds. No one turns toward the other. No one reaches out. No one speaks. And the silence isn't from arguing. It's from having nothing left to say. She continues to play her role, goes to work, takes care of the kids, cooks, keeps the house tidy, even smiles. But deep down, she's wilting, bit by bit, like a flower in a glass case, watered regularly, but with no air to breathe. The saddest part is, no one sees it. The man beside her doesn't see it. Outsiders certainly can't. People still say they make a beautiful couple. They still show up together, pose for photos, smile for appearances, but only those living it know. The photos don't capture memories, they only capture existence. Then one day, someone very ordinary, maybe a co-worker, an old friend, even a stranger, asks her, "Are you okay?" That question stops her in her tracks, not because she likes that person, but because it's been so long since anyone asked her that with sincere eyes. In that moment, she realizes she's become used to being overlooked, used to holding in her sadness, forcing a smile, swallowing the words she wishes she could say, and suddenly, her heart remembers what it felt like to be listened to, a feeling she thought she had forgotten. She doesn't need a perfect man, she doesn't need sweet talk or grand promises. She just needs someone to show up when she's most worn out, someone who asks how she's doing, and truly means it. And sometimes, that's all it takes, for her to feel something stir inside. Women don't fall out of love easily, but they will slowly shut down if they're always the only one keeping the flame alive. They don't ask for much, just a little care, steady, simple, but real. Just enough to feel seen, to feel loved as a wife, not just someone who shares the same house. Many marriages don't fall apart because a third person interfered. They fall apart because the first person quietly left her heart day by day, hour by hour, with his silence, his neglect. Some men ask, why did she change? They don't realize she changed after hundreds of days feeling alone in her own relationship. After hundreds of times she wanted to speak but stayed silent. After hundreds of moments when she needed a hug, but his hands were holding the remote or glued to a screen. What kills love isn't the third person, it's the first one, forgetting how to love, day after day, forgetting how to care, forgetting that the woman beside him still needs to be loved. Like in the beginning, not loudly, not dramatically, just present enough for her to know she's not speaking alone in a two-person marriage. Love doesn't die from a major crisis. It dies slowly in the small things. A question not asked, a look no longer tender, a presence without connection, and in the end, she doesn't leave because she stopped loving, but because she ran out of reasons to stay. 3. Infidelity isn't always about sex. You might think infidelity is driven by desire, that the woman was drawn to your charm, maybe your eyes, your way of speaking, or something primal you believe you possess. You tell yourself, if she crossed the line, it must mean you're special enough for her to risk everything. But the truth is, she wasn't looking for sex. She didn't need to be touched. She was looking for a place to breathe. She doesn't leave because she wants a new love. She just wants to find herself again, the woman who used to feel, used to hope, used to believe that love was worth living for. The forgetting doesn't start with some big event. It starts in the smallest of days, a meal where no one asks how she's doing. A soft "I'm tired" is met with a distracted nod. One night, she lies with her back turned, and no one reaches for her shoulder. One time, she wanted to share a story, but you were too busy staring at your phone, and slowly, she stops talking, stops waiting, stops hoping, until one day, you show up, not with anything flashy, just at the right time. A gentle question, "Are you okay?" is enough to make her pause, not because you're extraordinary, but because it's been so long since anyone asked her that with genuine care. She doesn't love you, but around you, she feels alive. Her heart stirs, not because you're strong, but because you see her. That look, she hasn't received it in a long time from the person who once called her his wife. You're the third person, but you didn't intrude. You simply arrived at the moment her heart was weakest. And sometimes, showing up at the right moment has more power than any love confession. For women like her, infidelity isn't betrayal. It's a natural response from someone who's been hurting for too long and no longer knows how to speak up. She didn't leave out of desire. She left because she had run out of endurance. She doesn't need a title, doesn't need a promise. She just needs a place to let go, an embrace that doesn't ask, "When are you coming back?" A look that doesn't judge or interrogate. She needs to be a person, not just a character in the home she lives in. You think she chose you, but really, she chose the sense of safety she felt near you. She chose the feeling of still being alive. You weren't the destination. You were the rest stop after years of running too fast with no one waiting. And then, you fell in love. You thought she would love you back, but the closer you got, the more she pulled away. Because you were never someone she intended to keep. She didn't come to love. She came to survive, to remind herself that she hadn't gone completely numb. You weren't wrong to love her, but you'd be wrong to think that love could make her stay. She didn't leave because you weren't enough. She left because you were never the one she was meant to walk with long term. You were the coat she put on in the rain. When the storm passed, she took it off, not because she hated it, but because it was no longer needed. And you were left behind with everything that once felt like just a bit of fun that turned out to be real feelings. And now it hurts, quietly, because you gave your heart to something that was never meant to have a future. You might think you were special, but you were just a small shelter in a long storm, a temporary refuge, a place where she laid down her emotions to lighten the load before moving on. And like every stop along the way, you were never meant to be the place she stayed forever. For a two-faced game, the man becomes the pawn. You think you're in control, she has a family, and you're just the outsider who showed up at the right time. You're clear-headed, rational, and believe you'll never catch feelings. You entered this relationship with a firm mindset. No strings, no demands, no need for a title. Everything seemed under your control. She took the initiative, messaged first, checked in at just the right moments, said your name in a voice as soft as a breeze. No pressure, no promises, just enough to make you feel special. She didn't ask anything of you, and that made you believe this relationship was light, safe, and would never cross the line. But emotions don't follow logic. They creep in through every glance, every moment of waiting for a reply, every night spent scrolling through old chats, rereading the words that once warmed your heart. You start to miss her, you start to hope, and then you start to hurt over things you once thought wouldn't bother you. She's not cold, she's just different now, slower to reply, quieter. The little stories that once made you both laugh now meet with indifference. You fumble for reasons. You think, maybe I did something wrong, but the truth is, you've started to feel more than she ever needed you to. And when you truly fall for her, that's when she begins to retreat. Gently. No announcement, no clean break, just absence. She fades from the spaces you used to share. You try to hold on, but the tighter you grip, the more everything slips. Because you were never meant to be part of her life. You were only a temporary emotional fix, like a coat she puts on when the rain comes. You're useful, warm, reassuring, but once the rain stops, she takes you off. Not because she dislikes you, but because you were never meant to come inside. You're not the one who made her fall in love. You were just a place to hide from a life she could no longer breathe in. That truth hurts, but it has to be faced. You were never the destination. You were a resting place, a quiet moment while everything inside her was in chaos. She laughed with you, leaned on you, made you feel important. But once she found her footing again, once her cracks began to heal, she left. No blame, no closure, and you're left behind, with all the feelings you once thought were fleeting. Turns out, you loved her more than you expected. You played the role of a guest, and forgot you were only ever a guest. You thought you had the upper hand, but in the end, you were the one pulled in deepest. No one can predict the human heart. No one can truly know who's filling what kind of emptiness in someone else. She wasn't wrong. She just hurt in her own way. And you didn't deserve to be hurt. But you also had no right to expect love from someone who never promised to stay. In this two-faced game, there are no winners, only someone who was once vulnerable and someone else who mistakenly believed he was special. But in the end, you realize real feelings shouldn't be thrown into a temporary space. No matter how warm that space is, it was never built for someone hoping to stay. One day, when she's steady enough, strong enough to stand without leaning on anyone, she'll leave, quietly. No drama, no grand goodbye. She didn't come for love, so there's nothing for her to cling to when she goes. You weren't abandoned. You were simply put back where you started. A temporary stop. Sex was never the destination. It was just the shell of something deeper, the need to feel connected. And connection. That's what her marriage had long lost. Affairs don't start with lust. They begin with tiny things. A meal where no one asks how the other's doing. A hug that slips from habit. A once warm glance now cold like a wall. So if you're the one she turns to, understand this: you're not the prize in some game. You're just the space where she lets her guard down before going back to being the strong woman she always was. And sometimes, that alone is already more than enough. 5. When you ask for more and get pushed away. Everything started gently. You entered her life at the exact moment she needed a place to lean on, a temporary space to breathe. No one said much. No promises were made. She didn't fully open her heart, but she didn't reject your presence either. You felt accepted, even without a label. Just being heard, being near her, that was enough. She didn't say she needed you, but she also didn't tell you to leave. She let you stay beside her, like a quiet companion through a chaotic time. You thought you were rational enough to step in without expectations, but human emotions aren't that simple. The closer you got, the more you started to feel. You cared more, waited more, hoped she would feel the same. You started texting first, more often. You wanted to hear her voice every morning. Her moods began to influence your entire day. And then, one day, you asked her, "What do you want from me?" It wasn't meant to pressure her. You just wanted clarity. You thought, if she truly needed you, it was time for both of you to be honest. But instead of an answer, you got silence. Not a confused silence, a deliberate one. She didn't say anything, didn't explain, didn't deny it. She just began to fade. Fewer texts, shorter calls, less warmth in her eyes. You noticed, and you started to stumble. The more you tried, the colder she became. The more sincere you were, the further she pulled away. You didn't understand. You'd shown her nothing but honesty. You never asked for too much. Just a place, a small one, but real. Then it hit you. You forgot you were a guest, not the owner. You came into her life at a time when she needed shelter, but you stayed hoping to build something permanent. She wasn't wrong for letting you in, and you weren't wrong for falling deeper, but what you gave didn't make her want to stay, because she never planned to from the beginning. She didn't have enough faith left to start over, not enough strength to attach herself to someone else, not while she was still figuring herself out. You started to feel tired. She didn't leave you with words, but you knew she was closing the doors. One by one, she still replied, but colder, still listened, but shared nothing back. You felt like you were speaking to someone standing at the edge, not moving forward, not stepping back, just waiting for you to understand and leave on your own. She wasn't angry. She didn't want to hurt you, but she had nothing left to give. She had used all her kindness just to hold herself together, whatever remained. She didn't even know. All she knew was that the more she was asked, "What are we?" the more pressure she felt. She didn't have the energy to define one more relationship in her life. You hurt, but you didn't blame her because you understood. You had loved too much in a space that was never allowed to be called love. You came in with a full heart and left empty-handed, but deep inside, you knew you were sincere. And sometimes, that's enough. Not everyone we love will stay. Not every connection needs a name. Some relationships are most beautiful when they end before one person asks for too much and the other has no strength left to give. And you, no matter how much you loved, have to learn to stop when the other no longer walks beside you. 6. A weak husband, a wife's growing disrespect. There are men who believe that the more they yield, the better they can keep their wives. They get used to laying themselves bare so the other can step over freely. They get used to patience in everything, from one-sided arguments to emotional wounds. No one even asks if they feel. They see this as a way to protect the family, to avoid breaking apart, to keep the peace. But peace requires both sides to want to stay. You don't push back, don't get angry, don't defend yourself when you're hurt. You think, as long as she stays calm, as long as she doesn't walk away, I can stay silent. You believe that's tolerance. But in truth, you're turning yourself into a shadow in your own home, and a shadow, no matter how present, eventually becomes invisible. She used to see you as someone strong enough to shoulder things. She believed you'd be her support, but over time, you kept retreating until she could no longer find you in her gaze. She stopped asking what you thought, stopped needing you to make decisions. Everything at home, she handled it, decided it, managed it, not because she was strong, but because you had checked out long ago. Women love through admiration. When the respect in her eyes fades, so does the love. She doesn't need someone who always says yes, who always agrees, who's become so soft he's lost his shape. She needs someone she can lean on. But in your endless compromise, in your passivity, you lost yourself. You lost the very part of you that made her love you in the first place. You think yielding is love, is preservation, is generosity, but sometimes your refusal to stand tall makes her feel like there's no one to lean on. She has to grow stronger to fill in where you faded, and in that forced strength, she grows tired. And a tired woman no longer has the will to keep the fire alive in a home built for two. You don't realize how predictable you've become. Every decision, you leave it. Every emotion, you hide it. Every injustice, you swallow it. You're no longer the man she once loved, once admired, once looked up to. You've become just someone familiar, sharing space, sharing duties, but no longer truly there. She didn't betray you the moment you became soft, but with each passing day, you chipped away at your image in her eyes. When a man can no longer take charge of himself, a woman no longer wants to belong to him. Love doesn't vanish with a big event. It fades day by day. When you're too lenient with your own boundaries, you say you kept quiet so you wouldn't hurt her. But the thing that hurt her most was you leaving her to carry everything alone in silence. You thought love was endurance, letting things go, not speaking up. But people only love someone when they see a person with principles, presence, and limits. Even in love, she doesn't hate you. She just no longer believes you can protect yourself, let alone protect her. She wants someone to lean on, but she can't lean on someone who always steps back. She needs someone with a voice, not to dominate, but to decide together. But you, in the name of keeping peace, traded away your role as a man in the house for a fading and fragile place. You don't see it, but the quieter you become, the further she drifts. Not with action, but with emotion. No more compliments, no more admiration in her eyes, no more little questions like before. She lives with you like someone who no longer feels the need to hold on. You don't need to be stubborn. You don't need to raise your voice to prove you're a man. But you do need a backbone, so she knows where your lines are. You need to keep a piece of your identity, so she remembers you were once the man who made her want to be better. She needs to be reminded that you can be kind, but not invisible. And if one day you see her tired, if her eyes seem lost every time she looks at you, then maybe love isn't dead, but it no longer has a place to live. You're still there, she's still there, but between you now is only obligation, with no more attraction. And the man who once thought staying quiet would keep his home turned out to have lost himself somewhere along the way. 7. Marriage magnifies who we really are. Some relationships don't break because of a major crisis, but simply because both people misunderstood each other. From the beginning, you once believed that things would get better after marriage, that marriage would make people more mature, love more deeply, become more considerate. But what you didn't know is that marriage doesn't change people for the better. It only amplifies what was already there. Marriage doesn't improve anyone. It simply brings what's truly inside a person to light. The things once hidden during the dating phase, the cracks that were covered by smiles, the flaws wrapped in compromise, the moments ignored because love was still strong, they all start to show bit by bit, day by day, when two people live too close for too long and no longer have the energy to keep performing. You thought marriage would make people change, that they would grow up, be kinder, more responsible. But then you realized a wedding ring doesn't make anyone honest. It's just a band, and sometimes it's used more to conceal a person's nature than to symbolize commitment. Marriage, at times, simply reveals more clearly who avoids conflict, who overreacts, and who knows exactly who they are, but chooses to look away. You noticed her change. She became quieter, colder, missing the expressions you once loved, but instead of asking why, you just endured it in silence and told yourself, maybe it's work, maybe it's the kids, maybe she's just busy. But the truth is, maybe she was never exactly who you thought she was. She just tried to seem gentle when she was your girlfriend, and now, as your wife, she's dropped the act, and you're left with someone you no longer recognize. Or maybe it was you who changed. Before marriage, you were assertive, strong, had a voice, but after becoming a husband, you slowly turned into someone too soft, too vague, thinking that sacrifice alone could keep love alive. And she, the woman who once loved your edges, now sees a man so mild there's nothing left to push against. And so, the distance grows, even as you share the same space every day. Marriage is a magnifying mirror. A person who struggles to love will love even less under the weight of commitment. Someone who gives up easily will quit even faster under pressure. A truly kind person will deepen over time, while someone who was only pretending to be good will quickly show the limits they can't move past. And you, if you don't see this, will be left in constant doubt, disappointment, and confusion about why things no longer feel like they used to. You once hoped, believed, expected that marriage would be the next step forward in love. But marriage isn't about going higher. It's about going deeper, so deep that every raw part of you is exposed. No more hiding, no more pretending. And if either person wasn't honest from the start, or lacks the strength to face themselves, distance will form, even without anyone intending it. She didn't become worse after marriage. She just stopped pretending, and you didn't become less. You simply never learned to see people clearly, beyond your feelings. You thought love would take care of itself once two people lived under the same roof. But love doesn't grow on its own. It only grows when both people are honest enough to look at each other, not just the pleasant parts, but also the ones they struggle to accept. The ring on your finger doesn't keep anyone close. It doesn't hold the weight of a warm gaze. It isn't as steady as a hand that still holds tight. It means less than two people choosing, every day, to stay, even knowing the other is not perfect, and they themselves are far from solid. Marriage doesn't turn people into better versions of themselves. It just peels away the layers, revealing what's underneath. And if you're not mentally prepared for that, you'll feel disappointed, not because they changed, but because you saw them wrong from the start. You once longed for a peaceful life, but peace doesn't come from passiveness or endurance. It comes from two people who truly know who they are, who are honest with each other, and brave enough to keep loving, even after seeing every flaw up close. Without that, you'll only find yourself in a relationship where, day by day, you feel more distant from the person beside you, even though both of you are still there, still wearing your wedding rings, still calling each other husband and wife. 8. Choice, the cost, and awakening. After everything that's been revealed, you begin to see clearly, marriage doesn't change people. It only amplifies who they really are, and affairs are the same. They don't make anyone more special. They just magnify what's missing emotionally, and the illusions that haven't yet been tested. It was in that blurry space that you stepped in. You came at the exact moment she felt lost, just when she no longer wanted to try with her husband, just when silence at home had become the norm and intimacy felt forced. She never called you the replacement, but your presence, however gentle, was still an unspoken choice among all the things she didn't want to confront. At first, you thought you were just someone she confided in. Then you became her support. Then, quietly, you fell in love. No drama, no demands, but deep enough that you felt yourself being pulled into a place where your mind told you to stop, but your heart refused to listen. You believed this was different, believed this time it was real. That feelings this deep couldn't just be fleeting. You forgot one thing: in her life, you weren't someone she chose publicly. You were the space to breathe, a roof to take shelter under in the rain, a place she went when she no longer had the energy to keep playing a role inside her own home. But when the rain stops, when the pressure fades, when she calms down, you'll find yourself pushed away, without even a goodbye. You begin to ask, "What are we?" She stays silent, not because she doesn't have an answer, but because she knows it will hurt you to hear the truth. She doesn't want to hurt you, but she doesn't want to lose you either. So you stay in limbo, not moving forward, not stepping back, no clarity, but full of hope. Then one day, you see her walking calmly beside her husband at a crowded event. She smiles, lightly, naturally, not the smile meant for you, but enough to remind you you don't have a place in her official world. And in that moment, you wake up, like someone dreaming, suddenly being called by name. You can't build happiness on someone else's escape, no matter how kind you are, no matter how much you love. You cannot replace someone she's not ready to let go of. You are the one who came after, the place she leaned on during a moment of weakness, but not the place she ever chose to stay. What you gave was real, but if it only exists when she's exhausted, when she needs to hide, then that's not love. It's temporary. You start to ask yourself, am I being kept because she needs me, or because she doesn't know how to let go? And then you realize the one hurting isn't just you, it's also her. She's tired too, from living too long in something that doesn't even have a name. Awakening doesn't happen all at once. It's the process of learning to see your place in someone else's story, seeing the cost of loving someone at the wrong time, and understanding that not everyone you love will choose to keep you, no matter how good you are. Then, at some point, you stop, not because your heart stops feeling, but because you understand that love shouldn't exist in the shadows. You walk away, not to blame her, not to prove you're strong. You leave to protect the one last thing that still has meaning, your self-respect. And when there's enough distance, you realize maybe the kindest thing you ever did wasn't loving her, but learning to love yourself again. You don't need someone to choose you to have value. You don't need to be someone's priority to feel worthy. You just need enough clarity to not mistake someone showing up at the right time for someone who's ready to love for real. No one should live forever in the role of the substitute. You deserve to be yourself, in a place that's clear, where love isn't hidden, and where you're not waiting for someone to have a free hand before they come to you. Some relationships exist to awaken, not to last, and you, after everything, have awakened. There's a saying, it's not love that breaks a man, it's the blind hope placed in someone who was never sincere. In many stories, the man who enters the life of a married woman often believes he's the exception, that he's special, that he's the one who can make her willing to change. But the truth is, most of those relationships lead nowhere. Men stay clear-headed, don't step into the role of the affair, and then crown yourself the hero. Don't mistake a hug in her moment of weakness for real love. Understand this, if you are not a clear choice, you will always be just a temporary solution. Women, don't lie to yourself. If deep down you no longer love your husband, be honest enough to face it. Don't use another man as a coat to cover up what you're truly feeling. No one deserves to be the gap filler in your life. And you don't deserve to live forever in a role called fine. And you don't deserve to live forever in a role called fine. Pause for a moment. Ask yourself, do you still love, or are you just fulfilling your duty? Are you still living truthfully, or have you just gotten used to acting to keep the peace? Marriage doesn't make anyone better. It only reveals who is living truthfully and who is just trying to play their part well enough. And you, who are you in your own story?